You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Good afternoon, everybody, and a happy Friday to you all. It is time. The regular season has wrapped up for the UFL. Conference championships are on the line this weekend, and we've got to break down the games and make some picks. I am Ethan Haristadoulou. You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Let me know in the comment section down below. Who do you think's coming out victorious this weekend? Who's getting sent home losers? What are your score predictions? Who do you like? What do you think's going to happen? Let me know in that comment section down below. I would love to hear from you all. I'm starting off with the first game of the weekend. We begin with in the USFL Conference Championship in Birmingham as the Stallions host the Michigan Panthers here. This one's on Saturday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, ABC. We have ourselves a rematch of last week's game. This is the third time these two teams have played this year, and right now the Stallions are up 2-0. And one of the biggest things I think it's always worth stressing when it comes to division rivals facing off, it is always very, very difficult to beat the same team 3 times in any given season. And both the Stallions and the Battlehawks have to try and do just that this weekend here. Now, for this matchup here with the Michigan Panthers coming in, Danny Etling is going to be the quarterback that gets the call, with Bryce Perkins being sent to the IR this weekend here. He'll be backed up by Brian Lewerke, and you also have EJ Perry as like the reserve emergency third quarterback if need be, if both those guys go down. As for some other notables returning for this weekend, Marcus Sims, wide receiver, a guy that's averaging like 100 yards per reception, it feels like. Not really, but again, it does feel that way with the way he catches the football. And running back Matt Colburn also being back in the mix. We're getting a couple of huge pluses for the offense over there in Michigan. I think the biggest test this weekend, and they did a good job with it last week, but not the first time around these two teams played, is going to go to the O-line in this one here. Yes, there have been some issues defensively with the Birmingham Stallions over recent weeks with the loss of their defensive coordinator, and we'll get into that a little bit more in a second. But I do think that with this O-line and some of the issues that Michigan has shown in being a little bit of a leaky pass protection group over the entirety of the season, Birmingham comes in, they have 29 sacks on the season, third most in the UFL, and they managed 7 sacks the first time these two teams played. You want to see more of last week and not the first time around when these two teams first went up against each other. So let's see more of the 1 sack allowed like last week rather than 7 the first time around. We've seen 2 very opposite performances from this O-line against Birmingham, so I think that's going to be crucial for the success of the Michigan Panthers in this one if they want to come out victorious. I'm also really looking forward to seeing how Michigan opts to attack on the ground in this matchup here, racking up 135 total yards last week and a rushing touchdown against Birmingham. It's a pretty good run defense that they have over there, best in the UFL on Birmingham's end. Michigan, though, the number 2 rushing offense. They've had a litany of really good running backs all season long, although they did lose Wes Hills a few weeks ago. But Matt Colburn is back. You're going up against the best run defense. You had some success last week, and whether you want to point to that being maybe some missing starters on Birmingham's defense or not, that's not really the conversation I'm looking for. All I know is that you had 135 yards and a score last week. Don't be afraid to run the football. It has been the bread and butter of the Michigan Panthers all season long. It is a big reason why they are where they are right now. I want to see them lean into it and not shy away and feel like they need to throw the football or just rely on Danny Etling to scramble with his legs. Utilize your running backs. You still have some very capable guys in that backfield, and Matt Colburn coming back is huge for Michigan. On the defensive side of things, I called upon the defensive front going into last week's matchup and saying that you needed to come in and pressure Adrian Martinez and disrupt what he's able to do. And they did just that, finishing the game with 5 sacks at the end of it. So once again, I'm calling on the defensive front. Breland Speaks, Rondell Carter and company, all those guys, they've got to step up. They've got to come in. The only way you can beat Birmingham is if you disrupt what Adrian Martinez is doing. And they were this close last week to doing just that. They brought the pressure. They had the sacks. They did all of that. The offense just needed a little bit more. So if you can come in and be as disruptive as you were last week, I think you have a really good shot at potentially pulling out an upset. The offense is going to have to step up and make a couple more plays to ultimately ultimately come out victorious, but you were this close last week to pulling off that massive upset, and it would have been huge for momentum coming in here, but you should still come in feeling really good based off how that game played out, with it coming down to the final seconds in order to lose that football game. I also think you really need to zero in on these running backs in Birmingham if you're Michigan, with CJ Marable and Ricky Person Jr. being two very capable running backs, and on top of that, this offense having so much talent. If you can sort of neutralize what they do on the ground in at least some capacity, knowing Birmingham is the best rushing offense in the UFL, I think you have yourself a chance. But you need to really limit what they're doing. Marable may have only had 56 yards last week, but he was averaging 5.6 yards per attempt. He had only 10 carries last week for that 56. So you've got to mitigate what they are doing with their running backs on the ground. If you can make the offense more one-dimensional, I think you have yourself a far better shot of pulling out the win in this one here, maybe even holding Birmingham to less than what you did last week. That being said, for this game, I think what you really need to flip on over and look at, though, is what the Stallions are potentially able to do. Now, when I'm looking at the Stallions here, I think the big thing for them offensively, you got to get the ball in your playmakers' hands consistently. That is going to be key to the success of the Stallions offense in this game. Last week, tight end Jay Sternberger only saw the ball come his way, 3 times? And yes, he scored a touchdown. I'll give him that. But 3 targets, 2 receptions for a guy who is considered one of the best receivers, if not arguably arguably the best receiver. And I know we're talking tight ends and wide receivers. Keyword receiver, not wide receiver, but just receiver in general, guys that catch the ball. He is arguably your best receiver on the team, and you only targeted him 3 times. Now, granted, again, teams could have been hiding a little bit of their playbook and what they're trying to do this week here. I need to see some more targets for Jay Sternberger in this matchup here. And then wide receiver Deon Cain, he had 6 targets. He's one of your best wide receivers, but you only got the ball in his hands twice out of those 6 targets. Scheme those guys open. Those are some of your playmakers. Still to this day, remember last year's championship run for the Stallions and what Deon Cain was able to do in that USFL championship last year in 2023. He's a playmaker. Sternberger is obviously a dude, and he has proved that throughout the last 3 years of spring football. Let's see those guys get the ball in their hands consistently and frequently. On top of that, Ricky Person Jr. and CJ Marable, Person getting the lead spot for this game here as their number 1 running back. I want to see them heavily involved. And again, this probably goes back to maybe them just kind of holding back on the playbook a little bit here, but you finished the game with only 17 rushing attempts last week against Michigan. And I know Michigan is, again, number 2 rushing defense in the UFL. Can't really sleep on them. But 5 of those rushing attempts come from Adrian Martinez. So you're talking about another 12 that were split between the backs. As the UFL's best rushing offense, a team that was averaging 26.5 runs per game, I want to see that again here. Challenge that Michigan defense. The bread and butter of what made Birmingham as great as they were was their rushing attack. Same thing that I said for Michigan. When Birmingham was killing teams, it was because they were pushing nearly 200 yards, if not more than 200 yards in a matchup, and just killing teams on the ground. And it was always a great mixture between Adrian Martinez and what he could do with his legs, but also leaning into your running backs and letting them do what they do and punish defenses on the ground. I want to see Birmingham stick true to their game. Run the football, be aggressive, win up front, force Michigan to have to stop you. Don't make it easy for that defense. On the defensive side of things, though, for Birmingham, I think this is something that is very much worth talking about here, because Birmingham all season long, really good defense, and it has definitely faltered a bit since John Chavis had to step away. It's not quite as aggressive. It's not quite as threatening. You even see the dip in the number. We've seen some conversations surrounding communication issues and just a little bit of what seemed like confusion on the playing field. So there is definitely a little bit of concern, but I do think that there is still so much talent on this defense that you can still overcome that. And I think the key to stopping Michigan right now is by limiting their running backs. As I mentioned, they are the number 2 rushing offense, second only to the Birmingham Stallions. Bottling up Matt Colburn in this one, especially, even though Nate McCrary is the one that's getting the running back 1 spot in here, at least according to the depth chart. You need to bottle these guys up, and you got to stop them, because if you can make Michigan one-dimensional, yes, they have guys that can absolutely torch you through the pass. Danny Etling's the quarterback, and there are moments and times where he can be a little inconsistent throwing the football. Like, yes, Marcus Sims averages 18.5 yards per reception, which is the league-leading number for anyone that has at least 5 receptions or more this season. You also have Siosi Mariner, who's been tearing it up the last few weeks. He's averaging nearly 13 yards per reception himself. But you have to stop these guys on the ground, because if you can limit them on the ground, I think the secondary is talented enough in Birmingham that you can hang with those wide receivers that you need to worry about, and you have to just, respect the deep ball. Don't get too aggressive and come too close up front. But I think that guys like Dondrea Tillman, Carlos Davis, your linebackers, DeMarcus Gates, Calvatazino, these guys got to step up. They've got to win up front at the point of attack against the run. And if you can make Michigan one-dimensional, you can slow down their offense. And we've seen Birmingham do that twice this season. So I do think that they have the game plan. They have the pieces to be able to stop Michigan. It's just a matter of if they're going to be able to do so, and if this loss of their defensive coordinator continues to kind of bleed in. So we'll see. And it's hard to look at last week's matchup and try to take things away and say, this happened last week, that happened last week, so there's positives, there's negatives, all that, yes. But again, you have to remember, teams are holding things back. There was not really much to play for besides pride in that game. There was never a real opportunity that Michigan was going to come away and host a game or anything like that, with Ford Field being booked this weekend anyways. But it is, you can take away some of those positives and know that it seems like they do have the pieces and they have the game plan and ability to stop what Michigan's doing. So if they can shut down the run, I think they have a really good shot. All that being said, though, as to who I think comes out victorious in this game here, again, I stressed this when we started, it is so hard to beat a team more than 3 times in a season. And although that is the case, I have my reservations about just what Michigan can do through the air with Danny Etling at quarterback. And I don't want to sound like I'm talking down on Danny Etling, but there are some times where when I see him throwing the ball and where I see that football go, I'm a little bit concerned. And EJ Perry is not really a factor in this game here, knowing that he's the third quarterback. He's an emergency quarterback. He's only coming in if the other 2 guys are hurt. I don't think it can be a performance sub-in type of thing. It has to be the other 2 guys go down. And I don't think Michigan's in the department of faking quarterback injuries at any point in this game here to try to get somebody else in. I'm not sold on the quarterback spot the way I am with Birmingham, so I think I'm going to take the Stallions. Not going to be a blowout or anything by any means. Both games have been very close between these two. I think we're going to get another third close matchup, but this game also being in Birmingham is really swaying it in Birmingham's favor, in my opinion. So I'll take the Stallions. 23-21. It's going to be a tough, grindy matchup here, but I'm really looking forward to it. But I do think the Stallions have what it takes to come out victorious and represent the USFL in the UFL Championship next weekend. Looking at our second game now, we have ourselves the San Antonio Brahmas heading into St. Louis to take on the Battlehawks. And to be completely upfront right out of the gate, I think we're going to have ourselves a bit of a defensive standoff again here, and there's a few reasons as to why. This game at 7 p.m. on Sunday, this one will be on Fox. The other game, USFL Championship, is on ABC. Now, the Battlehawks, the big question is obviously just how healthy A.J. McCarron actually is. I think that is kind of weighing on the minds of just about everybody, whether you're a Battlehawks fan or a Brahmas fan. How healthy is he? How mobile is he going to be? How comfortable is he going to be in the pocket working on this injured ankle? The A.J. McCarron to Hakeem Butler connection has been by far the best connection as far as quarterback to a receiver is, as far as I'm concerned, this season. That being said, with A.J. McCarron's ankle injury, if that throws off that connection, and we kind of saw it last week as well when A.J. McCarron came back. I think Hakeem Butler finished the day with like 2 catches, maybe 3, but I think it was 2. That could be an issue for not only them two, but also just the offense as a whole and what St. Louis is actually able to do. Now, with that all being said, this is where I start to look at what else can you do offensively to make up for that. And in comes first team, all UFL running back Jacob Sailors. This is who I think they're going to really need to rely on in this matchup here to open things up for their offense and hopefully keep the Battlehawks afloat in this one heel. The Achilles heel to San Antonio's defense, which has been so aggressive and so good in so many spots this season, they have faltered at times against the really good running backs. Because they're so aggressive, I think at times San Antonio can let teams get by them. Now, don't get me wrong, San Antonio's defense has been really good against the run, but they do average over 4 yards per attempt allowed, and there has been instances, again, where running backs have gotten the better of them because of just how aggressive of a defense that they are. So that is something to keep in mind. And you can even look to just last week. Jacob Sailors and Wayne Gallman together on 19 carries, combined for 91 total yards, averaging 5.5 yards per attempt. That's a yard and a half above their season average. So it is possible to get the better of San Antonio on the ground, especially when they're coming in against St. Louis, who they expect to be a pass-first and pass-heavy team, but St. Louis can run the football. Jacob Sailors got that honor for a reason. So I do think there's an opportunity to maybe lean into your running backs, whether it's Jacob Sailors and Wayne Gallman, whoever else may tote the rock this season, and come in and maybe make things a little bit easier. San Antonio is the best passing defense in the UFL in a handful of statistics. So I do think that leaning into the run game is probably going to be a key factor for St. Louis coming out victorious here. On the defensive side of things, I think the big focus is going to be stopping San Antonio on the ground specifically. San Antonio's run game was not good the first, I would say 3-ish, maybe 4 weeks or so. It wasn't until roughly the midpoint of the season, I can't remember off the top of my head the exact week, but roughly midpoint of the season, where John Lovett and Anthony McFarland really started to catch fire. Even Morgan Ellison, they all really started to figure it out and get it going, and now all three of their lead running backs average at least 4 yards per attempt or more. It's 4.1 if you want to really get down to the numbers there, but they're all very capable running backs that have found success running the football at various points this season. I do know that St. Louis, with how good they are against the pass, they're definitely going to hold their own. Number 2 passing defense this past season, and on top of that, I mean, they're littered with talent as far as the secondary is concerned, and they've lost guys this season, and other guys have come in and stepped up big time. Cameron Kelly, Chris Payton-Jones, Quinterio Cole, all those guys combined for almost 15 pass breakups as a group, 5 interceptions as well. You have linebackers that can drop back like Willie Harvey and Mike Rose. There are so many guys that do such a good job when it comes to defending the pass, and there are some concerns surrounding San Antonio's quarterbacks right now that if your main focus is just neutralizing what San Antonio does on the ground, St. Louis should be just fine as far as defensive effort is concerned here. I do think that St. Louis's focus just needs to be neutralizing what they're going to do on the ground. And if you do that, you have yourself an opportunity to maybe take advantage of a mistake or two that you might get from either, whether it's, Quentin Dormady or Chase Garbers at quarterback, whoever it winds up being, because at least at this moment, I don't have the depth charts for this game here. I just have it for the first game. I think that St. Louis should be all right, but focus on stopping the run, force them into being a one-dimensional offense, and you have yourself a really good opportunity to come out as a winner in this game here. On the Brahmas side of things, I will say that I was all in 2 weeks ago, going into after their big victory over the Birmingham Stallions, but last week's offensive performance has me a little bit scared. St. Louis comes in as the number 2 passing defense, as I mentioned. And when you look at some of the numbers, they are tied for second in interceptions with 9, third in pass breakups with 42, and they're not very far behind second and first place. They are a very disruptive defense against the pass. And again, the big question with quarterback not necessarily being as secure as I thought it might have been with Chase Garbers coming back, how the quarterback fares may dictate what exactly happens to the San Antonio Brahmas team during this game and potentially the rest of the playoffs if they manage to pull out a victory here. Who starts? How do they play? How does the backup play if for whatever reason the starter has to get pulled because of poor performance or something else? Both these quarterbacks are in a very weird spot. Quentin Dormady has just been very up and down. 6 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He has had some really ugly games. He's had some good performances, but he's had some ugly games. Then Chase Garbers, who in my opinion was absolute nails prior to his injury. He goes down. He has a solid first game back, and I feel emphasize the word solid. And then he struggles last week, ultimately winds up having to leave the game. And Quentin Dormady comes back in and it did not really do too much to make me feel confident in what this offense could do through the air. So I do think that with the way this team can run the football, they've just got to lean into their running backs. You rested both John Lovett and Anthony McFarland last week, so I do think that going into this matchup here, lean into your running backs and do some damage. St. Louis is an average run defense at best. I believe they're ranked 4th in the UFL right now as far as yards per game is concerned, and they're allowing about 4 yards per attempt as well. So leaning into your running backs and what has kind of gotten you to this point where you've had some struggles in the passing game. Like, you do have stud players as far as receivers go, don't get me wrong, but the strength for this offense right now in San Antonio is absolutely their running back. So I think you got to lean into them. Between those two guys, and also, like I said, Morgan Ellison, he's no slouch himself. Like, all these guys are averaging over 4 yards per attempt. I think you need to lean into the ground game, take advantage of what is like the weakness of the defense in St. Louis, and just lean on those guys. Because I'm a little bit worried as to what's going to happen as far as the passing is concerned for the San Antonio Brahmas. I hope I'm wrong, but I do have my reservations about it right now. Defensively, it's going to be all about that front, and I think it has been pretty much all season long. What they have been able to do as a defense with that defensive front all season long is borderline insane. You're first in sacks with 32. You're second in tackles for loss with 51, and I believe the first place team is at 53, so it's not like you're super far behind. Disruption and pressure is the name of the game for what San Antonio does on defense here. I do think, though, that, and this is especially if A.J. McCarron is feeling better coming into this week, maybe a little bit better than he did last week, and he comes in and he's really starting to throw the football around and he's starting to slice and dice. I think San Antonio really needs to be aggressive and try to steal a possession or two. One of the lone non-bright spots of this defense, and there's really not a lot, has been their inability to take the football away and steal a possession or two from the opposing offense. You have 10 takeaways on the season. You're averaging literally 1 a game. And St. Louis, they have 11 turnovers offensively this year, basically 1 a game. They're not a team that really gets rid of the football in poor manners. They take very good care of the football. And A.J. McCarron is not one to really throw interceptions. Like, you've got to be on your A game if you're going to be taking advantage of him. One of the most effective ways, and this just goes for all of football, to slow down an offense that is as high-powered as St. Louis can potentially be, is to take the football away. So you've got to go out in this matchup here. You know how aggressive that defensive front is. Someone over there maybe, going after the football, trying to punch the ball out, whatever it may be, or someone in that secondary. You have some really good corners in that secondary. Someone needs to jump a football or two and take away that ball out of A.J. McCarron's hands, because if he gets going, it's going to be a long day. And I know that in the past, you've proven San Antonio pass rush is king, and you can disrupt even some of these best offenses. We saw it as recent as last week, but we need to see a possession or two, because it doesn't matter if you're able to disrupt and you're able to create all these problems if you're not able to finish the football game and win. So with that, we need to see a takeaway or two. We need to see someone step up and go after that football. This has been a great defense, but the only thing that's really kept them away from being elite has been their inability to take footballs away. That being said, for who I think comes out victorious here, again, another close matchup. I do not anticipate either one of these games being very far apart. I think they're all going to be decided within one score, and probably even closer than just like 3 points, in my opinion. I do think that we're going to get a little bit more of a defensive affair with this one here. I could see the score being a little bit lower, especially with questions around quarterback for both of these teams now. A.J. McCarron's health, and also just what you're going to get from either one of the quarterbacks that wind up starting for San Antonio. But I think I'm going to go, especially it being at the Dome, I got to go with the St. Louis Battlehawks here. I'm just having a really hard time in my head wrapping around the idea that San Antonio is going to come in and put up enough points to be able to come out victorious. The performance that we got last week really scared me away. And I know that the 2 lead running backs for San Antonio weren't available for that game. I know. But football is a pass-first game. You win by being able to throw the football effectively. Some of the marquee wins for San Antonio, like when I think of Chase Garber's 3-touchdown performance way back earlier in the season in the fourth quarter, you win those games because you can throw the football. And if you can't do that, I'm a little bit concerned about San Antonio's chances in this one here. So I'm leaning St. Louis. I have them winning 18-16. Again, close affair. If San Antonio can come in and take the ball away again, once, maybe even twice in this matchup and steal a possession or two, I think that could complicate things for St. Louis a little bit further. They might have to abandon the run game, especially if you're able to take advantage and put up points. But the big question is, can they take the football away enough to put St. Louis in that spot? I don't know. So that's kind of where my reservations lie with San Antonio. So I'll take the Battlehawks 18-16. Two extremely close games this weekend is what I'm anticipating. But those are my picks. Those are my predictions. Let me know in the comment section down below. What are you expecting this weekend? Who's coming out winners? Who's going home losers? Who's representing their conference in the UFL Championship? I'd love to hear from you all. And as always, if you made it to the end, I greatly appreciate it. I will see you all next time. Have a good one.